Welcome to the Monkey Mind Podcast, your number one platform for athletes and mental health. Hosted by myself, Danny Perez. This is episode 78 featuring Zack Goodman. Zack is a former hockey player at King's College, now turned assistant men's hockey coach at Johnson & Wales University. But before we get into today's episode, we have a quick word from our sponsor. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Daily Dose CBD Inc. Daily Dose CBD Inc. creates full-spectrum CBD products ranging from tinctures, balms, and dog treats. Research has shown that CBD has successful results in aiding in the following areas: anti-inflammation, anxiety, PTSD, help with breaking addiction, neuroprotection, epilepsy, arthritis, chronic pain, and sleeping disorders. Daily Dose makes an extremely safe and effective product that we know you will love, enjoy, and benefit from. Daily Dose has given Monkey Mind listeners 15% off all their orders. Head over to dailydosecbdinc.com and use promo code MonkeyMind15 for 15% off your purchases. That's promo code MonkeyMind15 for 15% off all your orders at dailydosecbdinc.com. Awesome. All right. So we got Zack Goodman on today. Super excited to have you on and welcome. If you could just, please introduce yourself to everybody who you are, and we'll get it going.
Yeah, my name is Zack Goodman. I'm originally from New York, now living in Massachusetts. I'm the assistant men's ice hockey coach at Johnson & Wales University, Division III program in Rhode Island. So, just starting up that in September, and super excited to get that going. So,
yeah, how's that been for you so far?
It's been really good. The head coach there, Eric Graham's been awesome to me. He's taught me a lot so far, and I'm really excited to get into games and get the season going. And learn a lot throughout this portion of my career as a coach. So, it's really exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah, congratulations on that. And just kind of tell everybody about your hockey career and kind of, I guess, your journey in the sport and what that was like for you, how you started, and just kind of where hockey took you.
Yeah, so I started, from a really young age. I started at around 4 years old. My two older brothers played. My brother played in college, and I always kind of looked up to him for sure. And, as I got older, I kind of had an up and down career, from the time I was, 14, just had a tough time finding a spot that kind of fit me. I played for the Junior Devils growing up for about 5 years, and then I moved on to the North Jersey Avalanche. And then after that 16s year, I really had a tough time, finding my way in the junior world, and kind of bounced around a little bit. And but I was able to kind of fight through it and make my way to college. And I played at the Division III level at King's College for 2 years. And, again, just kind of an up and down sort of journey. And, unfortunately it ended a little early, but I was able to kind of get into coaching early, which, I've enjoyed, quite a bit here in the early stages of it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think obviously when you reached out, it's funny you said that you wanted to talk about the transition from actually playing and then, moving on to the coaching aspect. I think as someone who did the same thing, I think you can kind of relate. I had, a career that was just all over the place. Some years were really good, some years weren't. And I think in hindsight, when you look back, I think there's a lot of great lessons to be learned from that. But you don't see that until after. So I think that's kind of something that we could both speak on there with that.
Yeah, definitely. Just looking back through the first year of coaching, you just look back at your experience as a player and you're like, all right, I could have done that different, or I wish I did that, and maybe it would have went differently. But I think it's kind of hard to look back at the past because you can't really change the past, right? You just kind of have to take it for what it is, as hard as that can be sometimes, especially when you're first out of playing, and just, understand that, especially as a coach, we're both coaching now, take the experiences for what you learned as a player and really relate to that as a coach for the players that you're coaching now. And I think that's what I've really tried to do with, guiding junior players and now guiding college players through their journey. I'm just trying to bring my knowledge to, what mistakes I made and, what went right for me, and, kind of teach them in that sort of way.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's awesome. I think I can say the exact same thing. It's just kind of taking what you learned as a player. And like you said, you can't, change the past, but you can always reflect on it and say, hey, what are some things I did well? What are some things I didn't do so well? And then just kind of translate that message to the players who are, still able to, I guess, make something of it.
Yeah, exactly. And what I really like about our group at Johnson & Wales is we're super young. We're a super young group. So all these guys, they know I'm a young guy. So they've just been asking countless questions. how'd you transition into college? Like, what worked for you? What routines did you get into? What did you find that, worked best? And it's just great that like they're asking me that many questions right away. It's like, it's good that they can have a guy that's younger and then they can relate to kind of help them succeed at this level. So it's good.
No, without a doubt. Yeah, I guess transitioning, more so into the mental health piece, if you just want to, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, just kind of sharing your story about that whole side of things and, where you're at with that.
Yeah, definitely. So I can say right now that I'm in a pretty good place. It took quite a while to get there. When it really started triggering for me was, throughout last year. And, when I started coaching, I could have went to a Division III school to finish my eligibility, but I decided, because of COVID and because of everything else going on, I decided to, take a coaching opportunity at Connecticut Junior Rangers that I was given and kind of run with it. And it started out great. I was really, high on the job, and, it was a really good experience. And then as the year went on and I started working with the older guys, like I kind of started, struggling mentally quite a bit. And it really all came to fruition for me in about February when, I woke up in the middle of the night and my heart was just racing like as fast as it can go. And I never experienced anything like that. And I never, felt anything like that. And it lasted for 48 hours. It lasted quite a while, and I didn't really know what to do. Like it kept happening and happening, and then I even saw a cardiologist. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And then eventually I seeked help. I seeked professional help, and I saw a therapist, and she's helped me incredibly, like incredible amount, like trying to think for the right word here, like how to not so much be afraid of the anxiety that I feel sometimes, but how to like attack it and sort of befriend it. And I think through that experience with her and with my experience on what I've kind of been through since then, I've been able to kind of appreciate what it makes me think about rather than being scared of it.
Interesting. So you had I guess, was it like a panic attack or something? Like, was it an anxiety attack that lasted the 48 hours or just like that upbeat heart racing kind of feeling?
Yeah, it was an anxiety attack. It was a panic attack. It was, I don't know which direction to go with my life. Am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
I wish I was still playing because I have the capability of still playing, but at the same time, like coaching is what I want to do for my life, and I really love it, enjoy it. But I think like there was a bitterness to the game where like I wasn't really enjoying going to the rink. And I think that's really what got to me because like, you go through the process and it, like, you go through the process of recruiting and getting to a school and being really happy there and choosing what you want to do. And then you kind of, it doesn't, like for me anyway, it didn't really work out how I wanted it to. And then like you're thrown into a position right away where like you're trying to help junior guys get to that level. And you're like, wow, like I should still be there. Right.
Yeah.
And you kind of have like a bitterness to like, you want to help these guys, but at the same time, like you're mad at the game because like it didn't work out for you, right? So it's like, yeah, it was a lot to handle. Like at such a young age, at 24, like I was coaching at the junior level at a pretty significant level, and it just like kind of got to me in a really tough way that kind of it lasted for a long time, and I went throughout the summer I was really struggling as well, and when it really started getting a little bit better was when I got this college opportunity, and that's like, it's been really good since then. So.
I think I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I feel like most players who, I guess, leave the game or are done with it, that's completely normal to have, I guess, a bit of bitterness or just, I don't want to say resentment, but just like, oh, I wish I was still playing or that sort of feeling. And it's hard to let go. I mean, something you've done your whole life, and to have it be done, it's a hard thing to go through. And there's almost like a major grieving process that comes along with that.
It's almost like I mean, it sounds a little silly, but it's almost like you lose the loved one, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
no, exactly.
Like, you're going to the rink, like and what my therapist tried to teach, she tried to teach me is like, it's an identity change, right? Mm-hmm. You meet someone new and they say, what do you do? And you say, I'm a hockey player. And then, you're done with that. And people say like, hey, what do you do? And it still wants to come out as I'm a hockey player, but instead it's like, I do this or I do that, or now I'm a coach for you and I, right? It's just so different, and it takes a long time to get used to. And I think like there's a part of every athlete that like doesn't want to say they're done being an athlete. Right?
100%. No, definitely. So did you ever like experience any sort of anxiety growing up, or was this something like that one experience that you had? Was that like something that was completely foreign and new to you, and it was just like a kind of like a weird, crazy experience, or was there always kind of little, like, I guess, things that happened in the past that, okay, like I've kind of dealt with this before?
Yeah. So I've definitely dealt with anxiety in the past, but I don't think I ever was able to come to realization that it was anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I would call it nervousness instead of anxiety, right? Perfect example, like my last year of juniors. I was playing for New York Apple in the EHL, and like it was March and I did not have a commitment yet, right? And yeah, I would wake up in panics, but I would just wake up and say, wow, I'm really nervous today. Like I wouldn't know what it is, right? Because I was uneducated and I didn't really have anyone to kind of guide me through that. Like, yeah, you're probably dealing with some anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think like growing up in my family, like being viewed as someone strong, like an athlete, right? Like they don't think you have anxiety. They're like, oh, Zach, like he doesn't have anxiety. Like he'll fight through it. Like he has hockey today. He'll come back and feel fine, which is true. Like even when hockey was giving me anxiety as a kid, like I would go to the rink and then come home and be like, I feel great because I just had hockey.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, like, another example is my freshman year of college. Unfortunately, like the day before the season, the last captain's practice, I tore my ACL. And that was a total panic. I mean, absolute panic.
Yeah.
Like my freshman year of college, right? You're bombarded with classes they haven't taken in 4 years, because you're just playing hockey.
Yep.
And then you got to get surgery, and then you got to do rehab for half the day. And it's just like so much to take in. And I definitely felt the impacts of anxiety throughout that freshman year of college for sure.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, like, you didn't, looking back, you realized that's what it was. I think a lot of people can relate to it, where growing up, they've always, I guess, had experiences with anxiety, but just never really knew that that's what it was. And then it manifests later on when, I guess, there's other problems or other things that occur in life. And then it's this big kind of moment where you're like, oh, I'm having a panic attack. And then from that, you can reflect and be like, oh, that's just like always kind of been there, always been like an underlying sort of thing that's been happening in my life, just in various occurrences that you never really realized.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like one of my biggest problems, which is I think what I think a lot of people do this, is like they have, I mean, for me anyway, like, and I don't know if you can attest to this, but you almost have too much pride to talk about it. So you just ignore it, right? And then when you ignore it, as the years go on, it gets worse and worse and worse until it kind of implodes, right? Or explodes. And I think that's what happened to me in February of this year. Like I never talked to anyone about anything that happened to me with hockey. I never talked to anyone about anything that happened to me personally, which is a whole nother story, obviously. And I think everything just kind of, came to a halt like that night when, it was the middle of winter and I felt really alone. And I was just thinking to myself, like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I'm not a hockey player anymore. I'm trying to become a coach, but I don't know if I'm doing the right things to do that. Like, and everything just kind of was like, and just went, kind of off the rails for a little while.
Yeah, I think everyone can relate to that as far as like just that identity piece. It definitely just kind of escapes you. And if I guess like when you talk about not speaking with anybody about it, that makes the problem worse. And that's something that we always try and stress. We've talked about it a million times here on the podcast. Is just like people who never wanted to talk to somebody and they finally did. And then whether it be a therapist or just somebody like a family, a friend, just being able to get that off your chest makes a huge difference. And I want you to kind of talk about your experience with that. And you obviously, sought out professional help, which is unbelievable that you did that. But talk about the benefits for you with speaking to someone who's a professional, and I guess talk about your experience and what the tools that they gave you to help mitigate the anxiety. And I like what you said about how they taught you to become a friend or befriend it and look at it differently and attack it. Cause I think perspective is everything. And that's one thing that therapists that I've, worked with in the past have kind of said is just changing your relationship and changing your perspective with that stuff. So I'm happy you mentioned that, and just, talk about your experience with talking to a therapist about it.
Yeah. So obviously, like when you start going to see a therapist for the first time, you're like very reserved and like you don't want to say a whole lot, right? But then you kind of start to feel a little more comfortable with whoever you're seeing. And what she really taught me was like, people would rather hear what you have to say than not hear it at all and wonder what's wrong, right? So
Yep, it's a good
like
point.
I had such an issue prior to me seeking professional help with just shutting down whenever anything would happen, whether that's, again, personally, athletically, with a teammate, with a family member, with a friend. Like I would just shut down, right? And I think that's because I would just get a little angry, and I would get a little bit of anxiety because things weren't going my way. And what she really taught me was just be vulnerable. Like most people, and if they care about you, they're not going to judge you for being vulnerable, right? They're going to appreciate that you're communicating in the right way. Because if they don't see their behavior for maybe what happened, what they've done to you, or your behavior for what you're dealing with, then they won't understand the way you're acting, and they'll just kind of think that you're either, mad at something or mad at them when you're around other people, I think. And she's really taught me to, just kind of take a step back when you are feeling that anxiety, and maybe take a couple deep breaths and just think to yourself, like, what's the threat? Is it an actual threat? And if it's not, how can you kind of deal with it to attack it and just calm yourself down a little bit and understand that what's really happening isn't all that bad.
Yeah, I think the vulnerability thing is huge. Just because if you're able to be honest with it and talk about it, then it's just not this thing that's kind of sitting in your head and these thoughts that are lingering. You can just kind of, hey, like, this is what's going on. This is what's bothering me. And we've said a million times on here too, and I want to consistently reiterate it, is that there's more people going through something than there are people without. I mean, at some point throughout our lives, everyone has times where they're struggling, and it's just completely normal. So I don't understand why we feel the need to hide it. I get it, because we don't want to kind of be open and vulnerable like that, but there's major power in the vulnerability and when you're able to talk to people, because you can get help. And I think if you are vulnerable, people are more times than not going to have your back and be in your corner. And then the other way that I see it too is if you're vulnerable and people aren't supportive or aren't in your corner, or don't understand, like, or don't want to be there for you, then that's easy. You just weed them out. And it's an easy way to weed out who's your friend or who cares about you and who doesn't.
Yeah, and absolutely. And and through the whole process of, me going through what I've gone through since February, with the panic attacks and, kind of changing my identity over the last year, like I found that once I started becoming more vulnerable and once I started communicating better with my family and friends, I became closer with my family and friends.
Yeah.
Right. It's crazy how that happens, because like throughout time, like you're nervous how they're going to view you if you do come out and say like, hey, I struggle with anxiety. Certain things trigger me. I don't do well with these situations. But at the same time, like when you do speak out, all you get is support from the people who really care about you and the ones that are closest to you.
Without a doubt.
So I really found that, it took me a while. Like I seek I started dealing with this in February, and I seek professional help in April. And it took me probably until late June, July to really like explain to my family and my friends like what I was really dealing with.
Yeah, it does take time, and it is a process. I feel like both of us are in good places where we can just say, hey, like, it's okay to be vulnerable, but we've also been in the place where we didn't want to be and didn't want to really open up about it and speak. So I do want to make that clear that it is a process to get to that point. But at the end of the day, you have to make the effort to do that. And it does take time, but little by little, if you chip away, you can get to a place where you can feel comfortable talking about it. And from that, there's a lot of power that comes with it, and you kind of start to gain control over your thoughts and the feelings and kind of what's going on at the root of the problem.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's definitely a process. And I think like anyone who is struggling and anyone who is, going through the journey of, trying to find a good fit for professional help that might be for them, like you're not gonna get a quick fix. I think that's something that I wanted when I started. I wanted a quick fix. I wanted to go to like 3 sessions and say, okay, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I've been going consistently since April now. And, that's a that's quite a bit of time. And, my therapist kept kind of reiterating it to me that like, you're not going to get a quick fix. It's what you want, but you have to put in the work yourself outside of the office to really get to the root of the problem, like you said.
For sure. No, definitely. So are there specific things that your therapist tells you to do, say on a day-to-day basis, to help you kind of cope with, whether it be generally just things that you should do in like a daily routine, or is there things that she tells you, or he or she tells you to do when there's a specific anxiety attack happening, or just kind of like some specific things that you're told to do that can kind of, help you throughout your day-to-day?
So routine is the key word, right?
Yep.
I think as athletes, you're routine oriented, right? And I think one thing that really got to me when I was coaching last year anyway, was I didn't have a routine. I didn't know what worked and what didn't as a coach, whereas I knew what worked and what didn't as a player because I did it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
So, I try to do this. I'm a very routine oriented guy, and I try to kind of do the same sort of thing every day. Like I go for a walk every morning. I try to get something in me for breakfast every morning, no matter how early I wake up. I make sure to, and the biggest thing for me is physical activity, because as an athlete, you're constantly on the go, right? You're in the gym, you're on the ice, you're on the field, you're on the court, and I think when you throw in physical activity into your daily life, that releases some adrenaline and that gets rid of some anxiety. And, I was doing that when I first started getting into coaching, but then I got away from it. And I found that when I got away from it is when my anxiety started to shoot up a little bit. So, I work out at least 4 days a week just to kind of get that adrenaline of,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe when something is coming on and when my anxiety does start to kind of go up a little bit. I have a release I have a release with exercise, so like, let's say I'm in a meeting, on a Zoom call, and I start feeling anxiety throughout the call. Then when the call ends, I'll do 10 push-ups, or I'll do 10 jumping jacks, or I'll go for a quick run. And if I do that, then I just find that my anxiety kind of settles down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think going on to the things about routine, I mean, obviously, I think that doing any sort of physical activity is super beneficial just for I think physical benefits and obviously mental benefits that come with it. I think that's huge, but I think the routine thing is kind of a common theme that we see here, just because I don't know. There's this term that I love to use, or that I like to think about, and it's like clutter exterior is clutter interior. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And if everything is like a mess, say in your apartment or your house, or just like things are out of order in your life, let's say, like you don't really have a structure or any sort of routine.
Yeah.
And guess what's going to happen on the inside of your head? You know what I mean? Like it's going to be a mess, and you're going to be scatterbrained, and you're going to be buzzing around and just disorganized. So I think the whole routine thing that you said, I think it is a common theme that people find peace in their routine. I think I'm happy that you mentioned that, because it's a huge beneficial thing that people can start to do now, just to make a tiny fraction of a difference. Maybe it's a fraction, maybe it's a huge difference that you didn't realize, but I think just by kind of taking control of your life in that aspect can be pretty empowering and really help out.
Yeah, definitely. And it takes a while to get down the routine and find what works for you. But
Exactly.
but once you do, it's just such a difference maker. I mean, it's just crazy. Like,
Big time.
I didn't have one for the last year, right? And then I finally found one that kind of worked for me. And I just, even when I wake up, like, because there's certain days where, I'm in a good place now, but there's still certain days where I wake up and I'm, not feeling the best. But, I stick to my routine and I stick to what works and for myself. And it kind of helps me, attack that anxiety instead of kind of just ignoring it.
Definitely. I like what you said about what works for you too, because I think we try and this is totally normal, but we try to, I guess, see what works for other people and implement into our lives. And then we get pissed when it doesn't work. Like, how come this isn't working? It's like, okay, like maybe it works for them, but for you have to try and figure that out. And it's a process of trial and error and seeing, hey, like, this doesn't work for me. Maybe it works for other people, but for me, it doesn't. And you have to just put that to bed and say, okay, like, on to the next thing. What's going to work for me here? And just, it's a trial and error process, and it takes time at moments to figure that out. But once you can kind of dial it in and see what works for you, then you start to find that rhythm and I guess that groove of finding that place of routine and I guess peace is the word you want to say.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like you do have a sense of peace, like when you find stuff that works for you, and when you can kind of take a deep breath and say, I'm going to be okay. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and I think one of the worst things anyone can do, whether you struggle or not, is compare yourself to others, right? And comparing what people do, what others do, compared to what you're doing, right? Like everyone's on their own journey, um, whether that's anything in life. It doesn't have to just be with athletics or coaching or anything. That can be with a business career. That can be with, really anything. Like you just, it's really hard to do. It's really hard not to compare yourself to others because you see
100%.
other,
Yep.
right? Because, you think you're doing enough and then you see someone succeed who's, you have no idea what path they've been on. And you're like, I want that success, but you
Mm-hmm.
have to find what works for you to get there.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, we're all guilty of comparing ourselves. And I guess, just going off that, you always see people, living successful lives or doing things that maybe I want that, whatever. But at the end of the day, everyone's journey is different. All you can do is focus on yours. And the journey that you're on is the one that you're meant to be on. And you have to just take the lessons that you get from that and just continue to move forward. And I know it's easier said than done, but it's not good to compare because then you just get distracted and kind of lose sight of the lessons that you're supposed to be learning on your own journey that you're on. So, and then as far as I guess overall like lessons that you've learned, kind of reflecting back on your hockey career now into coaching, like I guess what are some specific things that you've obviously being taking some time away from the game as a player now moving into the coaching sphere? What some I guess key lessons that you've picked up on and reflected on and learned that you now try and pass on to your players?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to the comparing, right? To the
Mm-hmm.
comparing things to other players. I would always, always, always compare myself to other players. Why are they playing power play? Why am I on penalty? Like, why am I not on power play? Why am I scratched this game? And I found that, again, reflecting back on it, like if I just kind of focused on myself a little bit more and stayed a little more positive, maybe, then I maybe things would have went a little differently. But I think you just got to show up at like from I preach this to my players all the time. No matter if you have a bad game or if you have a bad play or you have a bad shift or you're scratched, like you just got to show up the next day just ready to go, ready to work. And for me, like I didn't really get that guidance from my coaches. I think like growing up, like that's something that kind of I lacked with my coaches, and I try to preach to my players all the time. Like if you need me to work on something with you, like that's what my job is, right? My job's to get you better, right? My job's to push you to get better. And I think I'm not saying I didn't have any coaches that didn't do that, but I'm saying I don't think I had a ton of coaches that were really there for me or got the mental side of things when I was really struggling throughout the season. Not mentally, but you're in a rough patch. Like you're not having a good day. You're struggling. You're struggling on the power play. You're struggling on the penalty kill, or you were out of the lineup all weekend. Like I want to be a coach that can kind of help players through that because I don't think I really had that as a coach.
Yeah.
And I think like the lessons as a player that I learned was always be a good teammate, even if you're not in the lineup. Always be positive on and off the ice. Always just be there for your teammates and just make sure you're doing whatever you can to make the team better.
Yeah.
Right. Because when your coach sees that when you're pushing yourself to get better, even when you're having a bad day or when you're out of the lineup or when you're struggling that day or that week, then, that goes a long way, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I agree. Those are awesome things that you said. And I think really key points. And that's awesome that you were able to kind of reflect and see, hey, maybe this is something I can be for the next generation of player that maybe I was missing out on. And you recognize that and you're in the pursuit of doing that for the next generation of player. I think that's huge and awesome to see. And yeah, I don't want to take up too much of your time here. And I'm really appreciative of you coming on, but just how I like to end all these episodes. What are 3 things that you would pass on? I guess we kind of covered this a little bit, but I guess 3 things you'd pass on to your younger self or someone who is, going through a similar thing that you've gone through or kind of in a rough patch.
Three things. That's tough.
I know, or like three pieces of advice, or just kind of.
Yeah, three pieces of advice would just be like, just always put one foot forward. Just, keep moving forward. Like no matter what you're going through, no matter how hard it gets, just keep moving forward, because like the minute you give up, it's, you never want to give up, right? Just keep moving forward, no matter how dark it gets, or no matter how difficult times may be. Like everything always works out, right? Everything always seems to work out in the end, and I can attest to that just because of everything I've kind of gone through as a player, and I've always known I wanted to coach. And so yeah, that's probably number one. And number two, just always have a positive mindset, that you can improve no matter what that may be, whether that's in the classroom, whether that's on the ice, in the locker room, whatever it may be. Just always have a positive mindset that that you can improve yourself, and you can always, be better in some certain way. And I think um, three would probably be just communicate. Just always communicate. Whether you're struggling or times are good, no matter what, just be open to communicating about what you're going through.
I love it. Yeah, those are great things, man. I think this episode is going to help out a lot of people who are struggling or have struggled and can relate. And we're going to hear a lot of things that are very positive in this. So I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you coming on here and being vulnerable on the platform and being able to talk about this. So again, it's going to make an impact, and I'm just appreciative of your time and you coming on here to talk about this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a great time doing this. First time I've done anything like this. So thanks for having me on, and it was a good experience for sure.